This is an EDH deck template for Esix Fractal Bloom, which is 4 green blue for a 4/4 with flying. The first time you would create one or more tokens during each of your turns, you may instead choose a creature other than Esix Fractal Bloom and create that many tokens that are copies of that creature. If you do not know what an EDH deck template is, it's a unique way of building a deck. In the description, there's a deck list, and you will pick a certain number out of each category, and when you pick all those categories out, you will have a deck. This deck cares about two main things. First, you need a card to clone, and second, you need to make tokens to clone that card. So what is the card we're gonna clone? We're gonna pick 6 out of 9 of this category, and some examples could be Biovisionary, which is 1 green blue for a 2/3. At the beginning of the end step, if you control 4 or more creatures named Biovisionary, you win the game. This is one of, if not the best cards to clone. Making 4 copies of it is surprisingly easy, and it happens on end step, so you don't have to wait till your next turn. Halomar Excavator is 1 and a blue for 1/3, human wizard ally. When it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, target player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of allies you control. So let's say we make 4 copies of Halomar Excavator, which is a pretty typical amount for this deck. We can then have 20 triggers of milling somebody for 5, which is enough to kill someone. And as we add more and more Halomar Excavators, it becomes even easier to kill the next person and the next person. This can be a very powerful way to deck someone out. Turntimber Ranger is 3 green for 2/2. When it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Turntimber Ranger. With this, you can make a huge amount of Turntimber Rangers and a huge amount of wolf. Our Turntimber Rangers can also become very large. Sadly, Esix only triggers on the first token you make each turn, so the wolves it makes you won't become copies of the Turntimber Ranger, but it's still incredibly powerful. Kyga the Tidestar is 5 and a blue for a 5/5 legendary creature with flying. When it dies, gain control of target creature. If you make a copy of it, because of the legend rule, it will die. So you can steal creatures with this card. Agent of Treachery is similar, although it won't die. You do get to draw a ton of cards as well. Nylea's Colossus will allow us to pump up our commander or another card up to huge power and toughness, and Nyx Bloom Ancient will get us exponentially insane amounts of mana. If we make 4 copies of it, that gives us 5 Nyx Bloom Ancients, and every single 1 mana we make will actually be 243. Just to illustrate how insane Nyx Bloom Ancient is, I will go through a scenario with an X spell token maker. With 7 mana, we play Nyx Bloom Ancient. Next turn, we play a land. This gives us 8 mana, which triples to 24. We cast Pest Infestation, where X is 11. This means we can make 22 clones of Nyx Bloom Ancient. On the next turn, we have 847 billion mana with our 9 lands. Like, what? If we can make copies of Nyx Bloom Ancient, we can essentially have infinite mana. The second category is token makers. You will pick 6 out of 14 of these. Some examples could be Beacon of Creation, which is 3 and a green for sorcery. Put a 1/1 green insect creature token into play for each forest you control. Curious Horde, which is 3 and a green for an instant. Choose target opponent. You may create X 3/3 green beast creature tokens, where X is the number of artifacts that player controls, or X spells like Stolen by the Fae or Pest Infestation. Most of these cards will make at least 4 tokens, because that's the threshold where our stuff becomes insane. And in case we wanted to combine our token creators and our things to clone, we have both. So you will pick 6 out of 10 of these cards. These are cards like Avenger of Zendikar or Hornet Queen, which will both create tokens and be good to make copies of. Avenger of Zendikar is 5 green for a 5/5. When it enters, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each land you control. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each plant creature you control. Say we have 7 land. We will play Avenger of Zendikar, create 7 plant creature tokens, which will actually be Avenger of Zendikars. Then with those other 7 Avenger of Zendikars entering, we will create 49 plants. We can then play a land and put 7 counters on each of our 49 plants. It is is more than enough to win next turn. Hornet Queen is 4 green, green, green for a 2/2 with flying and death touch. When it enters, create 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. So we can create copies of the Hornet Queen, and we will end up with 5 Hornet Queens and 16 insects. Mirror Battlesphere is when it enters, create 4 colorless mirrors. So we can create 4 Mirror Battlespheres and end up with 16 mirrors. Deep Forest Hermit is 3 green, green for a 1/1. When it enters, create 4 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. Those will become Deep Forest Hermits, and those Deep Forest Hermits will create 16 total squirrels. And it says squirrels you control get +1/+1. So we will have a total of 5 Deep Forest Hermits, pumping our 16 squirrels +5/+5. So we have just created 16 6/6s. Master of Waves and Deranged Hermit are similar, although Master of the Waves has a higher ceiling and a lower floor. You will also pick 10 out of 20 removal. Most of it is pretty typical, but Thorn Mammoth and Perplexing Test are pretty unique to this deck. We also have some ETB stuff like Reclamation Sage. Mostly though, it's just counterspells and spot removal. For ramp, you will pick 10 of 21. A lot of this is stuff you can replicate like Llanowar Visionary or Farhaven Elf. We have some normal land ramp like Cultivate and Kodama's Reach. We have a few Mana Rocks, but other than Soul Ring and Worn Power Stone, I wouldn't run too many Mana Rocks, as having creatures we can replicate is very helpful. The more you can play that is replicable in the future, the better. You will pick 10 out of 23 draw. Our draw can get incredibly powerful with cards like Eidolon of Blossoms. Say we have an Eidolon of Blossoms and make 4 more. That will draw us 20 cards. Cards like Risen Reef, Garruk's Pack Leader, Gladewalker Rich List, and Generous Patron all function very similarly, and we can draw a huge amount of cards. We also of course have staples like Mystic Remora, Rhystic Study, and similar cards. We also have the other category. You will pick 11 out of 24 of these, and it includes token doublers like Doubling Season and Parallel Lives, which are great unless you're on a budget. Protection like Lightning Greaves, Heroic Intervention, and Nurok Stealth Suit. Tutors like Green Sun Zenith and Finale of Devastation. And haste enablers like Crashing Drawbridge. In other, we also have some pump like Craterhoof Behemoth and Endraze Forerunners. These could be a potential way to win. Kodama of the East Tree is also incredibly helpful, because if we make copies of our creatures, the CMC will still be maintained. We can put in tons of things for free. Rite of Replication, although it can be expensive, allows us to either clone our creatures twice in a turn, or clone our creatures when we don't have Esix out. Mystic Reflection essentially allows us to get our commander's ability without having to play it. It also just has other incidental great cards. You will pick 37 out of 56 lands, and which ones you choose are mainly dependent on your budget. Some of the lands help our deck, like Glasspool Mimic / Glasspool Shore, Mirror Pool, and Colony Garden, and some are just fixing or basics. You'll also pick 3 of your own to add. These could be ones that just didn't fit within the numbers, or things that I missed entirely. Overall, I think this is a really fun commander, and being able to duplicate our creatures means that exponential things go absurd. I intentionally made this deck so you could build it with a low budget. This deck could be anything from low to mid power on the Play EDH scale. Link in the description. If you do make some changes though, I could see this going in Battlecruiser. If this video helped you make an Esix deck, please subscribe with notifications on. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.